Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by Emmanuel Turlay, who is an ex-tech lead of machine learning infrastructure at Cruise. That's the San Francisco robotaxi company. He is the founder of Sematic. Sematic is an open source orchestration platform, which is dedicated to machine learning and artificial intelligence. Essentially, it offers the easiest and fastest way to develop and run ML pipelines across local DevBox and cloud clusters. So Sematic actually can reduce by 80% the time it takes to bring prototype to production and to retrain existing models with new data. Super excited to have you on the show today, Emmanuel.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks.
So like I mentioned, super stoked to have you on. For those that don't know, I actually met Emmanuel at the AI4 conference earlier this year in Vegas and got to hear a little bit about what he's working on. I know his boss over at Cruise. I met him as well, or his his old boss a long time ago. Just really was blown away by some of the stuff that he's working on. So wanted to get into all of that. I'm wondering if you, Emmanuel, can tell us a little bit about your journey. What brought you to what you're doing today? Tell us a little bit about your background. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from France, as you may be able to hear from my accent. And so I started in academia 15 years ago, actually. I was doing particle physics research at CERN in Europe, which is this huge physics lab that hosts the LHC, for example. And so I learned a ton of stuff from that experience. And after about 5 years in that area, I left academia to join a tech startup in Europe, just trying to do some more fun work and iterate more quickly than in large science experiments. And I ended up moving to the US in 2014 and joining Instacart. I'm sure everybody knows Instacart, grocery delivery company. I joined in 2014 when it was fairly small, like about 200 people. And so I had to build all sorts of backend systems for payments, order management, and so on. And towards the end of my time there, I started to look again at machine learning, data science, basically kind of a callback to my time in academia. And I started working on tooling for that field. And at the time, it was 2017. There was not much tooling around machine learning. It was kind of a nascent field, the field of MLOps. And so that's when I had the chance to join Cruise in 2018. And so Cruise in 2018 was starting to try to go towards production and try to commercialize a robotaxi service. And so when I joined, I was a bit surprised by the lack of infrastructure around ML at Cruise. They still were using a lot of heuristics on the car. Of course, they had a few models, but many decisions were taken by still algorithms. And so over the next 4 years, from 2018 to 2022, they really tried to move a lot of the decisions to models so that they can address the long tail of more like infrequent events that happens on the road. And so I noticed that Cruise needed a team to build tooling for ML teams and data scientists to be able to iterate quickly on those models. Because what you see is that the people that get degrees in that field, so like master's degree, PhDs, they can definitely architect models and write some Python and so on. But when it comes to actually running large-scale training jobs on like a large GPU cluster in the cloud, it was quite difficult for them to do that. And so oftentimes they would have to hand over their work to like more of a infrastructure engineer, which was a very slow process to have to go back and forth between those different teams. And so we wanted to make them autonomous in their own work, be able to just do all this work by themselves without having to ask for help. And so we developed a whole number of tools to make this much easier. So having access to cloud compute, visualizations, traceability, and so on. And that gave me the inspiration to leave Cruise in 2022 and start my own company, Sematic, to essentially bring those learnings to the rest of the industry in an open source fashion.
That is so fascinating. That's really cool. Okay, so one thing I want to get into what you're working on today, but I just have to ask: did you have any shares from Instacart when they just went public, or had you?
Yeah, I do have some. There's still a lockout period, so still have to wait for that. But yeah, I joined quite early on.
Okay. Unfortunately, the stock price probably didn't do super great on the IPO. If I
That's
remember
fine. That's fine. The earning call for Q3 is next week, and then there's going to be another earning call in Q4. And usually Q3 and Q4 are the strongest months for groceries because of the holidays, so it should be fine.
Okay. Yeah, you're cruising. That's awesome though. I always love hearing about people that got into some of these startups early on and then hearing because and then they finally come to IPO. It finally
Yeah.
pays off. So that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Sematic. What is the biggest problem that it's solving for customers today? Like the thing I know, like a lot of these platforms they do a number of things really well, a number of different features, but like if you could boil it down to like what's the core thing that people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you guys are tackling this or doing this. What's that feature for Sematic?
Yeah, so going from a small prototype in a Jupyter notebook to a sort of fully end-to-end pipeline running in the cloud, leveraging multiple GPUs and running for multiple hours can be really difficult if you don't have the right infrastructure. You have to learn how to use Kubernetes, how to debug your cloud jobs, how to package Docker images, all those kind of very hairy things that if you're mostly an ML engineer or data scientist, you may not want to spend time on. And so we make it super easy for people to just write a few lines of codes, run it on their local machine to make sure that it works fine, and then running it the same logic in the cloud on like much larger scale. So that's kind of our sort of killer features. And really, we enable our customers to retrain very quickly. So, when you have models in production, you need to retrain them fairly often with new data. If you don't do that, your model is going to lose its predictive power. It's going to miss out on like some trends in your data, for example. And so you have to retrain every couple of weeks, every month with new data. And if you don't have automation to do that, you're going to spend almost the same time that it took you the first time to redo it again every couple of weeks. And so, for example, at Cruise, before having the right level of automation, it would take us about a quarter to refresh a model that was already on the car. So like there's a model on the car, we want to retrain it with more recent data. It would take us about a quarter, which is obviously prohibitive if you want to move fast.
Right.
And so if you had the right automation, you can do this in a couple of weeks. Of course, you need to after that review the metrics, make sure that all the tests pass, the simulations are fine and so on. But at least getting those refreshed metrics, it could be just as easy as like clicking a button, pointing to your new data set, and then waiting just the duration of the job, and then viewing metrics a few days later.
Okay, super, super cool. Something that I'd love to ask you about from kind of the building side. Like, I'm wondering what's one of the challenges, maybe one of the technical problems that you encountered while developing Sematic, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so one thing that's very important for dev tools is the developer experience. So, how easy it is to adopt the tool, the onboarding. What is the time between the moment that I see like pip install something and the moment I actually get value from it? And so we try to make this as short as possible. So like essentially within 20 minutes, you should be able to run a pipeline, maybe not in the cloud, at least on your local machine, and start seeing results in the UI. So iterating with users on like what is the most natural sort of APIs to use. So like the best way to describe pipelines and so on. We did a lot of that in our time at Cruise, for example, iterating on what makes sense, what is confusing. So spending a lot of time empathizing with end users, things that may seem obvious to you as maybe a seasoned engineer may not be as straightforward for somebody that just comes out of school, for example. And so making it super easy to just get started was definitely one challenge. And then, cloud infrastructure also comes with its whole set of challenges. Packaging a local environment and shipping it to a cluster dynamically without the user being so much aware of what's going on is very challenging, because obviously what runs on your local Mac may not necessarily run on your GPU machine in Kubernetes. So if you want to sort of provide a certain level of fidelity between those two environments, then that takes a lot of iteration as well. So we did iterate with our customers quite a lot to make sure that things were as smooth as possible in that area. So yeah, those two areas were definitely some of the hardest. But in both cases, the key is to spend time with your users, whether it's customers or open source users or colleagues when you work at a company. Spend time with them, kind of get rid of your own assumptions, whatever you feel or you think about a problem, and try to see it from their lens and try to solve it for them, essentially.
Yeah, no, I think that's such incredible advice. I know for myself as kind of an entrepreneur in the software space, like a lot of times I'm like, intuitively, I'm like, oh, like this is going to be what customers love. This is the feature that they're going to love. This is the way they're going to love to do it. And then I'm like, oh, how come that feature didn't get up as much uptake as I hoped? And then if you go talk to the customer, they're like, no, I don't want that at all. What I really want is for it to like work like this. So absolutely love that advice. Something I'm definitely guilty of, and I think a lot of people. But yeah, really talking to your customer, I think is the way you're going to solve that problem. Something I would love to ask you about is, in your opinion, what is the biggest misconception that people have about deploying AI in production environments? Maybe something that people are getting wrong today.
So there's a lot of talk right now about AI safety. There was this executive order by Biden a few days ago. Society at large is kind of freaking out because, things like GPT-4 is very powerful, very impressive. And so people are trying to think that, we're not very far from like AI taking over the world and like being, damaging society and so on. And the reality is, between having something that is impressive in one use case, like chat, for example, with ChatGPT, and having something that actually is useful in production and actually brings value to businesses, there's like years of work. So people freak out about the sort of capability of AI, but I think we're years, if not decades, from having things that are like threatening or have like actual AGI. And so I would try to get people to like chill a little bit and, just enjoy the quality of the tools and play with them and try to be creative. And so the other thing is, if you are afraid of a certain piece of technology, the best way to mitigate that fear is to jump into it and start building things on top of it, be part of the conversation, be part of the user base, of the developer base, and so on. Because the fact of reality is, progress is almost like a force of nature. You cannot prevent people from just building things and developing new technology. This is just the history of human beings. And so the best way to have your say, if you have any kind of concern, is to throw your hat in the ring and start playing with everybody else. And so your voice gets heard, essentially. So I would encourage everybody to start, learning about AI from maybe at least a high level at first, and then diving deeper into tools and different problems and maybe academic papers and so on. Turns out it's a fascinating field. And everybody is good intentioned. Obviously, I'm sure there will be, nefarious players here and there, but overall, everybody has really good intentions there. And so I would encourage people to not be afraid of it, but like just go towards it as a tool for the future.
Yeah, 100%. That's something I talk with people a lot about. I'm like, there's no way you can like regulate a stop to AI or to the progress that we're making, the technical innovation. Like, it's going to happen. It's interesting. It's cool. It serves really great use cases. Unlike maybe like some things like crypto, I'm sure I'll get off of that. But anyways, it serves a lot of really applicable use cases. We use it every day. And so there's no way that we can really stop. And I think if people have concerns about AI and AI safety and anything like that, I think you're spot on. Like, get in the ring, test out the tools, have the discussions of, let's say this software comes and like, right, it's not perfect right now, but it gets perfect eventually. What does that mean? What shifts will we need to make? What guardrails? What, like, you can have the discussion about like, it exists, so now what do we do? But there's no like, stop it. Like, it will, it'll never happen. Something I'd love to ask you about, because I've heard this quoted before. I'm wondering, how does Sematic address the issue of retraining models with new data? I've heard people say that it's 80% more, you have a method that's 80% more efficient than other methods. And I'm just curious to hear your, what that is.
Yeah, for sure. So training a model and shipping it to production is not just running a PyTorch job. You have to prepare the data. So usually, you receive data in a sort of raw format in your data warehouse. So maybe like a SQL table or some images or some videos on your cloud storage. Oftentimes you have to process this data to remove outliers, normalize distributions, clean up the data, make sure you have a high quality training data set. Once you have that, you do have to do training, maybe multiple rounds of training to try different sets of hyperparameters. After that, you have to do evaluation, testing, and then maybe some A/B testing in production with some live traffic to your model and so on. So there's a lot of steps that go into retraining a model. It's not just like, I'm just going to rerun the same command line. And so if you don't have automation to do this, chain those different steps that sometimes run on different backends. A data processing job will run on a MapReduce cluster. A training job will run on a distributed training cluster, like different backends. If you don't have a way to automate all this and to automatically pass data from one step to the next, all the while tracking what's going on, all the configuration, all the code that's being used, all the data, all the outputs, the metrics, the visualizations. If you don't have a way to do all of this in a very streamlined manner, then you're going to spend, a few weeks, if not months, doing this again, which is why automation is really important in this area. And automation goes through developing pipelines. So pipelines are essentially a set of steps whose the step of the output of step A goes into the input of step B, and so on. And of course, you can build arbitrarily complex pipelines on top of that if you want to branch out and so on. But the idea is that you can get some really rough inputs and then pass it through a number of transformation steps. And at the end, you have a train model and some metrics to look at to decide whether you want to go to production. Think about this in terms of producing oil, for example. What you get from the ground is not what you put in your car. You have to do all sorts of transformation before refining it, processing it, and so on before you can put it in the car. If all of this is not automated, if you still have to do all those things by hand and carry the product of one step to the next, you're wasting a lot of time and it's very inefficient. And so if your core business is to have very high quality models and ship them to production often, then you are bound to require automation to do that. And for example, at Cruise, the idea was to get all the data back from the road, identify moments where models did not perform as expected. So maybe, for example, there was a hard push on the brakes because maybe some pothole hadn't been seen, for example, or a slight swerve around an obstacle, meaning that maybe a cone hadn't been detected early enough. So you find ways to identify those moments where the model may have missed something. You label them using sometimes human labelers to draw about bounding boxes and so on. And you add this to your training data set so that your training data set is more and more aware of rare cases that happen on the road. And then you retrain your model. And if you do this on a continuous basis every couple of weeks, your model is going to get extremely performant pretty quickly. And the only way to do this is to have this level of automation.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so fascinating. You guys have obviously come up with an incredible solution there that's a lot of people really need. Something I'd love to ask you about is kind of looking to the future. Where do you see the field of AI infrastructure heading in, let's say the next 3 years? What are some changes you think, and maybe how might, Sematic evolve in that landscape?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that's been very interesting to see happen over the last year, I say, basically since the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022. A lot of new people are coming to the field. So people that do not necessarily have master's degrees or PhD in machine learning, people that are regular developers, sometimes, even front-end developers, TypeScript people, even sometimes non-technical people like product managers or marketing people that are interested in playing with those tools. And so there's almost 10 times as many people coming to the field as there were before. And those people are more interested in building products around AI than getting the model to perform to the last percent of accuracy, for example. And so those people are going to need tools to iterate, for example, on prompts or on fine-tuned models, iterate on their product around AI models. And so those people are going to need tools that are less technical than we had before. For example, very common tools for ML engineers in the old days, if you will, were things like Jupyter Notebook, NumPy, Pandas, PyTorch, all those very technical tools that are still extremely important today for people that are doing the research. But if you want to build a product around AI and you just want to evaluate and compare different models, see which one performs best, what prompt performs best, and so on, you don't want to have to deal with those things. You want to mostly click in a UI, maybe write a little bit of code to query an API if necessary, and then see results quickly so that you can move on to building product and building value for your customers. So I think the field of dev tools in the AI space is going to move up the stack, as we say, more towards low-code solutions or no-code solutions where either it's fully in the UI or you have to use some very easy-to-use SDK, but you will no longer have to do all the groundwork from the base. And so we're actually doing this at Sematic as well. We're about to launch a new product in a few weeks called AirTrain, airtrain.ai, where we are essentially making it extremely easy for people to run large-scale evaluation pipelines on different models. So if you want to test, between Llama 2, Falcon, and Flantify, for example, if you want to compare how they do on your input data set with your set of prompts, then you can do it through a UI. And then in the back end, we have this complex pipeline that we maintain, but the front end, which is just a form and uploading data sets and then visualizing metrics, is much easier for end users to use if they don't have this ML expertise.
Super, super cool. Yeah, absolutely love that. Emmanuel, something I'd love to ask you about is what's been the most challenging part for you aside from like the technical side of this, but like you've started this like incredible company. What's been the most challenging part and maybe unexpected challenge in the kind of the company side, like really getting this whole business off the ground?
For sure. I mean, when you start a company as an engineer, you come in with big dreams of building the best tool possible and people will love it. It turns out running a business is fairly disconnected from the building of the actual tool. I've actually noticed that the quality of your product matters less sometimes than the quality of your go-to-market strategy. So your marketing, your outreach, and so on. And there are products out there, I'm not going to name names, but that have like mediocre products, but are doing great because their marketing is amazing. They have tons of events maybe, or like all sorts of, go-to-market strategy. And so I had to like put my engineering hat down, and I actually stopped coding about 6 months ago because it was a waste of time for me. I was spending my time better doing, market research, marketing, writing content and doing things like that. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me as an engineer, thinking that, you just have to build the best products and then your users will just come in flux and it will be just very popular. Turns out, of course, I will still advocate for high-quality products. I will never say, try to peddle some mediocre product. However, you can build the best product you want if you don't bring value to people very quickly, like in a matter of hours. And if you don't have a good go-to-market strategy, it's kind of a moot point. Of course, if you stay on the open source side, if you don't run a business, maybe that's fine. But of course, a business is made to generate money and to get users and traction and so on. And for that, do not dismiss the importance of marketing and go-to-market.
I love that. It's like interesting for me as well to see, being in the software space, like it almost feels like there's two separate things being built. There's like the business being built and then the product that's inside the business being built. Mm-hmm. And of course, like if your product is garbage, like you're not going to be successful. But at the same time, if your business surrounding that product isn't, you don't have the right people, you don't have the right go-to-market strategy, you don't have like the accounting, and like if you don't have like the business side of it in order, it's very, very hard to kind of find that success as well. So I think that's a great piece of advice. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of a success story where maybe like Sematic significantly improved an organization's ML operations.
Yep. For sure. We've been working with a number of customers in the last year, and one of them is a company called Voxel. So their website is at voxelai.com. Essentially, they do industrial monitoring. So they use video feed from security cameras in industrial warehouses to detect safety hazards. So they're trying to reduce workplace accidents by automatically detecting, if there's an oil spill, for example, or if somebody's not wearing a hard hat, or if some product has fallen off the shelf, or like a near miss with a forklift or anything like that. And so their problem is that every time they onboard a new warehouse, so whether they sign a new customer or expand to a new warehouse, they have to retrain their models, or at least fine-tune the model with data specific to that warehouse, because the angles of the camera may change, the lighting may change, maybe the product is a different shape of packages and so on. And so they need to retrain the models. Before using Sematic, it would take them about 2 to 4 weeks to retrain the model and ship it to the customer. So let's say, imagine you sign a new customer and you tell them, well, you won't have the product for another 4 weeks. Like, okay, well, I just signed that's not great. And so thanks to Sematic, they can reduce this to a couple days because the pipeline is entirely automated from like data ingestion, data processing, filtering, and then training, evaluation, generating metrics, packaging the model to ship it to the customer, and so on. And so within a couple days, they have the model ready to go. They only have to look at metrics and then give the green light, and then off it goes. And so it's much faster for them to onboard new customers. They are able to sign much more customer much faster, and the customers are more satisfied. And same thing on the debugging side. Every time they have a failure, because let's face it, large-scale infrastructure has failures often. They are able to debug those things in a matter of hours instead of spending days trying to figure out, where went my logs, what broke, and so on. So yeah, we're pretty happy with helping them do that. They are able to grow their business and keep moving forward.
That's super, super cool. I love that. It's really cool hearing the actual use cases of, people having success stories, because it really gives you a good vision of how much time you're saving these companies and some of the benefits. As we wrap up this interview, something I would love to ask you about is, what is one piece of advice that you could give to someone as they're is there kind of maybe looking to start a career in the AI infrastructure space today, or kind of getting into AI? What's a piece of advice you feel like you could give?
Yeah, so there's a very wide range of people in this area. You have people with PhDs, you have luminaries that have been in the space for decades, and then you have people that are just getting started now. And so it's very easy to feel like you don't know anything, like, you have imposter syndrome, you don't understand anything, and so it's too complicated, and then give up. And so I would recommend people to do not give up, and like keep learning and keep reading papers and keep learning more and more. For example, when I started my career in academia in physics, I was really drowning. Like all this, particle physics is a very complex field, quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, and so on. I was like, I don't understand anything. How am I ever going to make it in that field? And I kept at it, kept reading papers, rederiving everything by hand, understanding every single detail in depth. And over time, like this field is amazing. I love it. And AI is the same. For example, up until a year ago, up until the ChatGPT explosion, I knew a little bit about NLP, natural language processing. I knew a little bit about the transformer architecture, the attention mechanism, and so on. All those technical things that go inside models, but not really in great details. And I was kind of afraid to jump in because I was like, well, it's going to take me a long time to wrap my hand around it. But if you really jump into it and read things from sort of the first principles, and there's a number of blog posts out there and videos that explain, how to build a transformer model with like very simple steps, then over time your understanding grows slowly, and then you become more and more sort of maybe not expert, but at least like more versed at the field, and it gives you more confidence to start conversing with other people and being part of the community. So I would encourage people to not get discouraged, and then jump on the wagon, learn, read blogs, articles, videos. Actually, YouTube is a great resource for that, and then just get started.
Love it. Amazing advice. Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, sharing all your advice and insights. If people want to, get in contact or try Sematic and, really see what you guys are all about, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so our landing page is sematic.dev. So that's a good way to learn how to get started. And then we have a Discord channel on there so people can join and ask us questions. Always happy to talk.
Super, super cool. And to the listener, I will leave links in the show notes so you can go check out the website and find that. Also, thank you so much for tuning in to the AI Chat podcast. Make sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your day.